Hello, everyone. Welcome to the recording for the Indiana IEP Single Sign-On Transition Webinar number 1. Today you will hear from myself, Dr. Colleen Halicki, Brandon Myers, as well as James Rodman. We are doing a recording after the initial webinar, which was conducted on Thursday, February 4th. We apologize for those of you that were unable to join us for that webinar, but we certainly have taken detailed notes around questions that we received during that time, and we will get to those questions at the end of our recording of this presentation. The objectives you'll see listed here, we are going to be talking through steps necessary prior to your transition weekend. The focus on this particular presentation is going to be with independent school corporations or wholly independent school corporations and the process to transition into the LINC platform for access to Indiana IEP. So the key rules we'll talk about are with respect to the Learning Connection coordinators, LINC security coordinators, directors of special education, and then also for your IIEP users, what they can expect. We will show you a sample of communication for staff for what you might want to send as say, a director of special education to your staff that usually log into the Indiana IEP system through Learning Connection. As part of this process. And then we'll also discuss and determine key points of contact for you all as you transition, both amongst your team internally as well as us at the Indiana Department of Education. We also work closely with PCG, Public Consulting Group, and they are the party that provide for the Indiana IEP system. They were available on Thursday to answer questions, and we'll also share some of their responses at the end.
Hi, I'm Colleen Halicki. First, here are the transition dates for LINC. The Independent School Corporations and Indiana Department of Corrections will transition March 5th through 7th. Next slide. Today we'll be discussing a breakdown of the steps that need to be taken by each school corporation prior to the transition date. These steps are taken directly from the document titled IIEP Transition Steps from Learning Connection to LINC, and that document is linked here. These steps were successfully used by schools during the LINC pilot last fall. And I'll turn it over to James now for the next few slides.
Hi, this is James Rodman, IT. First of all, the first step in the process, as Colleen mentioned, was to communicate and prepare. So we are recommending, probably the most important step is to communicate. So special education directors need to know who the LINC security coordinators are. Every corporation has 1 to 2 LINC security coordinators, and those persons are designated by the superintendent. If you don't know who your security coordinator is, you can reach out to linc@doe.in.gov. And really, what we're recommending is that you form a team between your special education director, your LINC security coordinator, possibly a Learning Connection administrator, and possibly whoever your data administrator is or your state reporting person. So really form a team and then read over those instructions together. Some of you will be really good at the data side of things. Others of you will be really up to speed on the LINC side of things. So one of the first things you need to do is within Learning Connection, we're asking people to remove anyone that should not have access to Learning Connection that has IEP access, and then to make sure that the emails within the Learning Connection match the Google or Microsoft emails that the teachers will log in to LINC with. So it's important that the emails match, because that is what's going to match up the LINC accounts to the existing IEP caseloads. So a special note about contractors: all contractors are going to need either a Google or a Microsoft account issued by your district. If the contractor only serves your LEA, you can go ahead now and change the email in Learning Connection, which will then subsequently change it in Indiana IEP. But if the contractor serves more than one LEA, I recommend that you leave Learning Connection and Indiana IEP alone. And after the transition, the IEP administrator can go in and change the email address within Indiana IEP to match that link account. And only then can the contractor log in. So again, if the contractor works for multiple LEAs, then he or she is going to have multiple logins to the link system. So the system functions a little bit differently for cooperatives and charter groups, but today's webinar is specifically regarding those LEAs or corporations that are not part of a cooperative or a charter group. Also, if you're an employee at Indiana School for the Deaf or Indiana School for the Blind, you'll not be using the link portal to log into Indiana IEP. So you will continue to log into Indiana IEP via the direct login to that system. If you're a district admin at a school corporation, please work with Public Consulting Group to make sure that access is correctly set up for staff at School for the Deaf and School for the Blind prior to removing their Learning Connection access. So this slide is for the link security coordinators. So the link security coordinators are going to set the staff type or the role within the link portal. That staff type is called that staff type is called student support plans. So the security coordinator will add the student support plan role to the educator's either Google or their Microsoft email. Only one organization may add that access. So we are recommending that you use an upload, and we want you to assign student support plans to the state organization ID of the corporation. And then the schools will be assigned by the IEP administrator directly within Indiana IEP. We recommend that you upload these, and there are instructions online, detailed instructions online entitled Staff Type Assignment via Upload. While the tile specifies Ed Plan, Indiana IEP, and ILP, the Indiana ILP, or Individual Learning Plan, transition process will be happening at a later date. Please continue to access ILPs through the current way. So recommend that the staff types be uploaded, and that is done via 2 CSV files in our new data exchange system. And I've got a screenshot here of these 2 files. It's file 11 and file 12, and you would need both of these files. So in file 11, the header rows, actually the header rows on both of them are very important, so they need to stay there. What's going to happen is the security coordinator or the data administrator is going to prepare these 2 files with the EdOrg ID of the corporation. So that would be 10, your corp number, and then 0000. The 8-digit SPN or school personnel number, the role of student support plans, that would be for everybody, and then a begin date. So I would recommend that begin date would just be today's date, the day that you're giving access, and then there would not be an end date for the staff. And then you would also add them to file 12. Again, the EdOrg ID of the corporation. So you'd have 10 Corp 0000 for everybody, the school personnel number for everyone, unified access for everyone, and then use either their Google email or their Microsoft email that they're going to use for link. So you'll have those 2 files, and we recommend that you put everyone on those 2 files. And if you later have somebody to add, that you just add them to the bottom of them. You're going to save those as CSV files. You'll zip those files, and then the data administrator or the state reporting person would upload these files under the July window in the new data exchange system. And again, detailed instructions for how to do uploads and some things to think about are posted online. So we're showing here at the bottom of the Unified Access web page. There's instructions, the IIEP transition steps from LC to LINC, and then the staff type assignment via upload document, which is right the next one there. And then we also have the 2 CSV files listed online. Again, any questions regarding the upload process, feel free to email link@doe.in.gov. I'd be happy to take a look at the files that you have if you run into any trouble or have any questions regarding those.
Colleen here. The next step is to try it out. You're going to have your staff practice and confirm that they can log into LINC and see the Ed Plan tile. Please note that the tile won't work until after the transition weekend, so Monday, March 8th. And then you can share the document linked here with your staff to help them log in. There you can see the document I referenced to help your staff log in. You want to communicate the transition with your staff, and here's an example of what you can send them prior to your transition weekend. This is something a coordinator sent to their staff during the pilot, and you should feel free to use it. Once your transition is complete on March 8th, you'll be able to log into LINC, click the Ed Plan tile, and be taken to Indiana IEP. Caseloads will appear, but only if the emails match, meaning the Indiana IEP email address, the Learning Connection email, and the LINC G Suite or Microsoft email must be consistent for the user to log in. Also, just a reminder that there might be contract staff who work at multiple LEAs where the emails will need to wait to be corrected within Indiana IEP until after the transition. So here you see our contact information. We're the team working with LINC, the LINC transition, so please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have. And now we have some questions that were shared during the original webinar that Brandon's going to share with us, and we're going to, first we have the FAQ from James.
So this is some of the common issues or questions that you will receive from educators. So one of the most common things is that if the LINC site comes up blank, so this is due to a wrong bookmarked URL. So bookmarking the LINC site is very tricky. You want to make sure that all the bookmarks are only https://link.doe.in.gov. Another common issue is that staff don't know whether to either use the sign in with Google or the sign in with Microsoft login. So we're recommending here that you communicate and demonstrate. All staff at public schools will use either the red sign in with Google, which will use your local G Suite accounts, or the blue sign in with Microsoft buttons. They cannot use the iDOE login section at the bottom. And the I forgot my DOE login and password will never work. It's a very common mistake is they click on forgot password and the system will never send them a password because they don't actually have a DOE account for this system. So you'll want to make sure to communicate the way to log in there. There's also a looks like there was an error when you click on it. Most of the time it's on the Google account. So if that happens, it can be caused by having maybe a personal G Suite account open while you're working during the day. So what we recommend you do is completely log out of either Google or Microsoft, close your browser, and then come back to log into the site. And make sure that you're going to the link.doe.in.gov URL only. Another common issue will be that an educator will log in and not see the Ed Plan tile. So in this case, we recommend that you contact the security coordinator And a common mistake is that a staff type might be assigned to a wrong email. Maybe there was a misspelling in the email, or if you're using an alias. So for example, if there was a maiden name in the email, the alias email will not work. You have to use the email that is either the G Suite account login or the Microsoft account login. So just be aware of that. And then after clicking on the Ed Plan tile, and before the transition, it's okay to click on the Ed Plan tile before the transition, and the Ed Plan tile is not going to function until after the transition. But after the transition, if you click on the Ed Plan tile and no caseloads appear, this is most likely because the link login email doesn't match the IEP email. And another issue that you might receive after the transition is over is an educator might receive a multiple organization message. So you can only have the student support plan access at one organization. This is mostly an issue for a cooperative. The cooperative needs to assign the access. So I don't anticipate most of the standalone LEAs having this issue. And so those are some of the common issues and questions that we had. And now I think we can take questions or review some of the questions.
Okay, hello, Brandon is back. Well, not back because I wasn't here to begin with, but I'm going to read off the questions. Some of these were addressed in what we just did, but the fact that people needed reiteration and when we did this live, it's probably useful to go over them again. So I think this first one is probably for James. It's what is the security permission role the link security coordinator should add for them?
So the role is called student support plans, and it will be assigned at the corporation level. So 10 Corp 0000.
All right. And then the next question is, if people have their Learning Connection account currently tied to a personal email account, does that need to be changed to the school email account prior to the change?
Yes. We can only, all the emails need to match the link login emails, which are either the Google G Suite or the Microsoft 365 logins.
And right, and if that happens, then what will, if it's not changed in Learning Connection, I believe that the link account will be created in Indiana IEP, but it won't have any of the caseload information attached to it because it will still be under that old email, that old personal email that was in Learning Connection. So if you don't change it beforehand, you're going to have duplicate accounts, and one of which is and you're going to have to change that in Indiana IEP later so that they'll match up with the new email, at least new to Indiana IEP. The next question is, I am not in a co-op, but a neighboring school corp, and I share a psych, OT, and PT staff. They currently have emails to both corporations. Will they just have to use the email associated with the student to view the IEP? And I can answer that one. The short answer to that is yes. If you have a situation where you have personnel at both, since in this case it looks like they already have two emails, they should log in to the one that's, depending on which one the student they're looking for is associated with, just like you say, they should log into that and they'll have two separate link accounts. I know that some of you have kind of an ongoing shared services agreement that doesn't really add up to a co-op, and those are completely common and allowable under Indiana IEP. If we have a lot of personnel in that situation, you might want to consider contacting us so that we can create a network that will not necessarily be a cooperative, but it will function as a cooperative. But if you just have a couple of people like that and you're okay with the people using different emails, go right ahead and just continue those two separate emails and have them log in to whichever one they need at the time they're doing access to a particular student's IEPs. This next one is, will the Ed Plan Indiana ILP IEP tile replace the external link we are now used to getting in IILP? And I know James addressed this, but if we could just repeat it, I guess now.
So ILP users will be transitioned at a later time. For right now, they need to still use the direct login link. They will not access it through the link portal yet.
So if there are users in link, they can get in there, but they're not going to be able to do anything from that direction with ILP yet. The next question is, I missed out on how we can get these files started. Does this come from our end, or do we export the current Learning Connection system?
I think we did a little demonstration that might be worth sharing. James, if you don't mind walking us back through how to review what current IIEP users are listed through Learning Connection, and then also we can kind of revisit the upload options for the staff type assignment.
Sure, thank you. So a Learning Connection administrator will have the administration link at the top right by the logout. When they click on administration, then they can go on the left-hand side, they can go to corporations, and then onto the name of their corporation. So we'll just go to 21st Century Charter. You want to stay at the corporation level and click on the Educator tab at the corporation level. And under this tab, there is a report. It's called the Corp Members Report. That report can be run, and that will list all members of Learning Connection. And there is a column as to whether they can, whether they currently have IEP access or not. So that report can be downloaded into Excel, and you could use it as a way to obtain the SPNs and to review the email addresses. I would highly recommend that your special education staff review it for accuracy, because we don't want to just simply take the accounts from Learning Connection and put them into Link without having them verified. But you can use this to get a lot of the information and to review who has IEP access currently in Learning Connection, and also to quickly review whether they all have work emails that match the Microsoft or Google accounts. And that report does have just about everything you would need to create the 2 CSV files if you're a data person and are good with data.
Okay, so the next question is, do all teachers needing access to IIEP get uploaded under the district code, or should we put it in the school code?
You'll use, for the CSV uploads, you will use the district code, which is 10 Corp 0000. And then the local IEP administrator will assign the schools within that system.
Right, so Link is only at the Corp level.
Link is only, the student support plans is only at the Corp level.
Or network level if it's a network.
Correct.
Okay, and so the next question is, so contractors will need separate logins for each corporation with whom they work. And I believe the answer to that is yes, right, James?
Correct.
The only time it wouldn't be is if I said, since you're not part of cooperatives here, that really isn't going to be an issue. The only exception to that would be, like I said, if you have a shared services thing, but most of the time contractors are working as a one-off for a variety of different corps that don't necessarily have an ongoing relationship other than employing that same person. The next question is, what do I need to watch, or what instructions do I need to read, because I have 8 students that are served by another corporation and their teachers? So that looks like it is kind of a shared services situation where you are having students that you're sending somewhere else. That could happen for a couple of different reasons. One is that you have a relationship with them. Like I said, that's usually a cooperative situation, but we have some very small agreements. And that would be something that you might consider setting up as a network in our system if it's an ongoing thing. The other situation that you might have that situation in is where you have a one-off, sort of a one student at a time situation. So that could be that maybe you sent one student because of better accommodations. Maybe that student has really particular needs. This wouldn't apply to blind and deaf school, but something else. So that might happen. Another situation, which would be more common in that happens quite a bit actually, is when students are placed by outside entities, usually the courts or under medical recommendation, and somebody else is serving your student. In that case, you're going to have to create a link account for the personnel that are at those school corporations, and you can set it up at Indiana IEP so that they will only have access to that one child or two children, if it's another one, that you assign them to the caseload. So they won't be able to look at any of your other students to see their materials, to even see if who's enrolled in that school, or be able to search, but they will be able to see that. And so if you have that kind of environment where you have one student placed out of district, and you're still responsible, which is usually the case actually, unless parental rights have been severed, or you make an agreement with that local school corporation, which you can do also, you will have to add that outside person in order for them to have access to that particular student's materials. I hope I was clear on that, because I know that it's a concern, and it's happening more and more as we have tightened down some of our accountability provisions. All right, can you repeat what was said about the ISD and ISB staff? Most staff we don't maintain through Learning Connection, but we have one teacher there that is contracted, and we were told to manage her access through Learning Connection. And what should we do with that one that was sort of contracted at ISB and ISD? We've been in contact in a separate meeting with ISB and ISD. Who would like to share on that?
I can share what James had stated earlier is that if you're an employee at ISD or ISB, you will not be using the link portal to log into Indiana IEP. Instead, you will continue to log into Indiana IEP via the direct login. Now, if you are a district admin at a school corporation, such as likely the person asking this question, our recommendation is to please work with PCG to make sure that access is correctly set up for the individual staff at the school for the deaf and school for the blind within your corporation appropriately. So if there is sort of a unique situation or otherwise, just to confirm, please message PCG or through the message board in Indiana IEP, or you can also send them an email at indianaiep@pcgus. I believe it's .com, but I will verify that, and they will be happy to make sure that the user is set up appropriately in order to continue to be able to access the student file.
All right, splendid. Okay, the next question is, staff from private vendor organizations who currently have access to our system, do we make any changes for them in Learning Connection, or do we wait until after the transition?
So it sounds like the person is a contractor. So
They're private vendor organizations, so it could be like Daymar or TC Harris, a school or a facility that has had access to the child's record.
So Brandon, I think we discussed a couple of different options on this one. We don't feel like this situation is overly common, but I think you would again explore the idea of establishing an account through Link for the individual or individuals within that private vendor organization that need access to a particular student, and then set them up in Indiana IEP as a particular user type. And I apologize I don't have the name of that user type handy right
I think
now.
there is it's just called private vendor, I believe.
Okay. And so once they are set up with that account, they would still be able to access the student records they need in Indiana IEP. And if that private organization had students at multiple, LEAs, then they would likely need to have multiple logins, depending on where all the students that they need access to are located, or within which school corporation is considered the student's LEA.
Yes, and I mean, the other thing with that is if the school is not using Indiana IEP on a regular basis for your particular student, you may just want to transfer the documents, the IEP and a BIP if there's that securely, not really through regular email, but a secure file transfer can also be a way of getting those documents there if you don't want to give them an account. But you would be able to give them an account, and then they would just log in with your account to see the particular students that they have assigned to you. If we have a lot of if we have an ongoing thing there, we might look at a different way of doing that. But those situations usually don't last very long, and so or in a lot of cases they don't last very long. So it's going to be an ongoing updating on a case-by-case basis. Okay, regarding the state reporting side, will the SE event dates need to go into SIS to get into the data exchange, or will the dates in IIEP feed to data exchange? I don't even remember this question. Did we address this?
I think we just touched on it to say that there's no change in the data, that really the focus on this is just with IIEP users, and there's no change in how the student records are being communicated within any of the IDOE systems to PCG or vice versa. So
it's possible that could change in the future, but for the near and medium term, there's no other links between the student records in your SISs and in Indiana IEP and in the IDOE data hub done through data exchange. So the official records are still coming through your local SISs, Power School, Harmony, etc. All right, next question. I'm sorry, I thought I think I skipped a question here. I went ahead and now I'm reading it again. Okay, is that export of educators giving you all educators, not just those using IIEP? James, that's a question for you. The current export file out of Learning Connection.
It does give all educators. However, there is a field that says whether they have IEP access currently. And for what we're doing right now, we're just concerned with those persons who have IEP access. If they need it, it should be enabled, and that their email should match the Google or Microsoft emails.
Okay, and the second question was, I was wondering if there was an export out of IIEP. I believe there might be, but like James said, you're able to filter whether or not on that Learning Connection file, whether or not they have a special education tag or an Indiana IEP tag. So if that is selected, then that is an IIEP user, because that's how the IIEP users are created. So you really only need to use the Learning Connection file, because it will, if you filter out the ones or remove the ones that don't have that tag in that one column, you'll only be looking at the special education users. All right, this is James's favorite question. After March 8th, do we still need new staff to enroll in Learning Connection?
No, so after the transition, you will not use Learning Connection anymore, and we're going to disable Learning Connection at the end of this year. I do want to kind of mention, for a brand new user after the transition, the process would be that the security coordinator gives them the student support plan access. So when the educator logs in, they'll have the Ed Plan tile, At the moment they click on the Ed Plan tile and land into IIEP, that is when the Indiana IEP account is actually being created. So after the transition, no more learning connection and no more waiting, for 24, 48 hours. You just need the educator to log in, click on the Ed Plan tile, and that's when their IIEP account will be created.
Okay. You showed us how to change the IDOE Learning Connection email address if staff created their accounts with a personal email. But I want to change it to their work email prior to the transition. So I think this had something to do with whether or not the staff had created the email and if the Learning Connection administrator would be able to change it then. And I think the answer to that is yes.
That's correct. And there are instructions at the bottom of the steps to transition. I think Colleen or Riva is pulling it up right there. So there are instructions for both the user, the teacher, as well as the Learning Connection administrator on how they can change the email address.
And obviously, if you change it, then you're going to need to let them know that you've changed it, because their old login will not work at that point if you're still using it for a few days or weeks before the transition. And then also remember that if that user is in another corporation, changing it could cause some trouble, because it's going to change in everybody's corporation. That won't be an issue for the vast majority of people here, because you're dealing with staff that are completely in one school system since you're independent corporation, but it's possible that, so just be wary of that if you go in and do that yourself. Okay, James, this is another question for you. How is my access defined if I will be this, and I don't think we got the answer to this in the actual webinar, if I will be the security coordinator or the data administrator?
So the DOE sets up for Link this first account for the superintendent, and then the superintendent logs in and designates up to 2 security coordinators. And then the security coordinator can set a person, the state reporting person would have the data administrator role. And the data administrator is the one that would have the new EdFi data exchange system and be able to upload those files. The security coordinator could also assign themselves data administrator, log out and log back in, and have the same functionality.
Okay, so some people will be serving as both, depending on how your local setup is. If you have a separate state reporting person than an IT person, then there'll be 2 different roles. The data administrator will never then be, unless it obviously is the dual role. The data administrator as a separate person will never be dealing with the Link accounts. Is that correct, James?
Correct. The data administrator role is the state reporting role for the data exchange system. It's the security coordinator designated by the superintendent. It might be the same person, but it's the security coordinator role that allows them to set the student support plan access manually within the security portal. And it's the data administrator that can provide the CSV uploads to data exchange. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to email link@doe.in.gov.
Okay. Starting March 8, everyone can access IIEP through Link, and that would be the weekend after the transition. But will they also be able to access Learning Connection through Learning Connection until June? And the answer to that is no. So because we are unplugging the connection between Learning Connection and Link, they may still be able to be logged into Learning Connection itself because it will still be active, but the connection to IIEP will be gone. And if you click on it, I assume that it'll just error out somehow, but it's not going to go over to Indiana IEP.
And just to be clear, that is if your corporation is a part of the corporations transitioning the weekend of March 5th through March 7th, and then obviously Monday is March 8th, and that's when we expect you to be able to log in through the link portal in order to access Indiana IEP. If your corporation, for whatever reason, is transitioning a different weekend, then the end of June, that is the cutoff for all Learning Connection access. So it might be that if you're transitioning with a group transitioning in May, you're going to continue to have access to Learning Connection to Indiana IEP up until your transition weekend. And then starting on a Friday, I believe we're going to do 4 o'clock now, Eastern Standard Time, you will not be able to access Indiana IEP through Learning Connection the Friday at 4 o'clock, of your transition weekend. And then Monday, when you are able to access it, that is when your personal connection to Learning Connection and ability to log into Indiana IEP through Learning Connection is discontinued.
Right. So it's being done in these groups, but so yeah, not all at once. But once you're moved over, then it's over.
Right.
Okay. Do we need to wait until March 5th to do the file 11 and 12 upload, or can that be done ahead of time?
I recommend that you do them ahead of time so that your teachers can log into Link and practice seeing the Ed Plan tile. The Ed Plan tile will not function until after the transition weekend, but again, we recommend that you go ahead and add the student support plans access now so that your teachers can practice logging in and feeling comfortable with the Link system.
Right, and that will not hurt anything. The only issue would be to make sure those emails match just the weekend before we roll over, as we've been saying. Without Learning Connection, how do we add new employees to IIEP? I think James said that you would add a new user. The security coordinator would add a new user in the Link portal. And then as soon as that person logs in for the first time, Indiana IEP will say, I've never seen this email before, and it will create a new account. And at that point, you can assign students or authorize schools or whatever you're going to do.
And I think, Brandon, the only part that's important that I think is worth mentioning is the student support plan is the role that person has to have, or one of their roles within the Link system.
Right. So if you don't add that to a new user, the tile will not appear, so you won't be able to go from the Link portal into Indiana IEP. And that goes along into the question, does the student support role exist already? And the answer to that is yes, it does. And it's actually active for the pilot people that we had. So they are using it now to get in, but none of the people who have yet to transition, as James said, that tile's not going to work there. It's just going to take you to some boring website. I was hoping that it would be something more exciting, but I don't get my way. So that's the way it goes. But then on the day after the transition, on that Sunday, it will be active and will hook up to Indiana IEP. And our last question is, will there be an updated district administrator manual for Link? Now that's kind of a confusing terminology, because district administrator is a term that we use usually in this context for Indiana IEP, because that's the role within Indiana IEP that allows you to control all that stuff. So I think what they're saying is, will there be an updated? Oh no, I remember this question. I'm sorry. There does not need to be an updated manual because the district administrator function in Indiana IEP is not changing at all. So you may have some additional things that you have not been doing, like assigning schools, because some of you may have been relying on the Learning Connection to do that, but that functionality is still there. It was always there, and you can still use that. So the tools within Indiana IEP are not changing at all. So I would contact Matt Johnson for specifics on that manual, and Colleen also. But the tools in Indiana IEP are staying the same. It's just the portal to get into it that is changing, with that one caveat that that with Link, you're not going to know what schools are assigned, whereas with Learning Connection, you did. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Nope.
All right, so that's all the questions that I don't know whether we answered them today better than we did last week, but I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you all for participating, and we will be sharing this presentation out in a variety of ways, including by uploading it to the Unified Access page.
Thanks, everyone.